Hi guys, welcome back. We are working today on a 2004 XC90, although the same applies for anything on the P2 platform. This is a lower control arm issue. If, when you're braking hard, motorway speeds for instance, you get vibration through the wheel and also you feel it through the pedal as if you'd got a warped disc, so a kind of vibration, very, very unnerving. And if when you're cornering, going around a roundabout or coming off a motorway slip or something like that, if it feels like you're getting understeer, that the alignment is off, and then when you're going in a straight line it sorts itself out, the issue could well be your lower control arms. This is the lower control arm, and this is the rubber bung that causes all of the problems. This basically gets squishy, and the movement that comes from that in this joint basically de-aligns your wheels. So as you're going around a corner, if this squishes over and the one on the other side doesn't, then your wheels will be pointing in very slightly different direction. Now there's a super easy component to work on. We have a bolt here and a bolt here. There's another one up at the top, and there's the one on the end of the bottom ball joint. That's it. A little bit tricky to get at. A little bit of a trick to help you to release that joint there, but this really shouldn't take too long. The parts themselves are nice and cheap, about 40-50 quid, something like that, plus the VAT, so not the end of the world. But yeah, these things can cause some really unnerving symptoms. I should add that I'm working on an XC90 here. These are a little bit harder to access because of this aircon pipe on the V70. I've done that, and on the S60. But still, you can get an offset spanner into here. So where the workshop manual says you need to raise the engine and all that nonsense, you don't. Just use an offset spanner to get at these two. On the off side, the right hand side, and on the other side you shouldn't have any problems at all because this pipe is peculiar to the right hand side. Okay, so here we are underneath the car. I've got this up on jacks. Very important when you're working under the car also to maximise safety by sticking the tyre under the sill if you can. We've got a 21mm on the end of the bottom ball joint here. Now, regulars on the channel will have seen this tip before, but when you're working on either the bottom ball joint or the control arm or anything that's usually under load, it is easier if you lift the suspension leg using the bottom of the rotor there as an anchor point. That will allow us to compress the spring at the top. But there is one very important thing to remember, which is that right now the only thing that's holding the rotor on is that tiny little 10mm bolt there, because usually this is clamped in place by the wheel. So what we need to do is replace the wheel bolts in order to make this a safe anchor point. Don't forget that, otherwise that could shear and then you'll have all sorts of problems. One other little trick for this particular job is that as this pulls out, you don't need to get these all the way out, just enough to release from the back of the bolts. So we just need that much, the thickness of that. But even so, it can be difficult to remove the spanner once it gets tucked in behind this corner. All we've got is a little plastic nut, a little plastic grab there, a clip. So we'll just pop that out just to buy just enough space there to keep on working. You could always go with it being this loose to an open-ended spanner as well, that would work. Okay, I'm securing this at the bottom with a 19, on the top it's a 21. Okay, right, this is nice and loose. Just going to get that bolt out. Now these ones can be really super tricky to get out, so a bit of leverage never hurts. If you give them a bit of a whack. You can even use the tuning forks if you've got one. So that can now be driven out from the top. I'm just using a dead blow and a breaker bar here. As is often the way when you get into a job, you find others that need doing. So this bottom ball joint here has considerably too much play in it, so I'll replace that as part of this job. Basically all you need to do is loosen that bolt, the one on the other side as well, take those out and then drive a spreader into this gap all the way around here. Lots of heat, lots of penetrating oil, and just drive it out. New one goes back in with a bit of copper grease to make it easier next time. These are just wear and tear components, but yeah, that ball joint is shot. There is one major advantage of doing it this way. I suppose it's good form to change the ball joint as you go, and that is you can now apply major oil, major heat and major violence to this whole corner to separate things out. You can see I've already put some penetrating oil on there. What is super important to remember to do though is to put a wet rag around your constant velocity joint, because otherwise all of this heat is going to put a hole in that and it'll start flicking grease all over the place and you will fail your annual inspection. There you go. So remember, heat rises, wet rag around that, and then just go for it. Okay, so tip for you: if it's bank holiday in the UK and you're stuck, go to Euro car parts. I was surprised that they were open, but they had the bottom ball joints I need on the shelf, and it was only 27 quid. So looking good. Now I'm going to attach this to the control arm before refitting the whole lot, but that slots in there nice and easy. And you can see already a bit of dirt coming off this here, so I'm going to clean this out with a little wire brush. Recommend you get a set of those, they're super cheap. I think these ones were 3 brushes for £2.50 in Halfords. Plenty of places around where you can get them from though, so we'll just clean the gunk out the inside of that joint. Clean up the mating surface as well, because these things always rust together. And then to prevent it from sticking again next time, a splat of copper grease. And this is going to be held in with bolts, so you don't need to, well, it's also going to be subject to the entire weight of the front end of the car, so you don't need to worry about it falling out with the grease. This is just to stop the metal sticking onto the new part. Because I've greased that, I don't need to grease this, which is nice. Anyway, that is the hub carrier prepared for a new bottom ball joint, and as I say, that just slots in there and then bolts in. Don't forget the thread lock on the new bolts. Okay, so next up I'm going to prepare the rest of the location points here for the new control arm. Okay, remember that this nut always goes at the top. If you put the bolt at the top, you'll never be able to get it back out, and you have to remove this thing completely to release the control arm. Okay, so new control arm, fairly hefty component. They are handed. The new ball joint is going to go in here, and with these, remember that the flanges go on the outside to lock it into the bottom of the hub carrier. So I'm going to locate this in here and just loosely bolt that on, but before I do that, I'm going to put some copper grease on this as well, in the vain hopes that this will stop it from seizing on, and next time I need to split the two apart it'll be a lot easier. Let's say just put some copper grease on there to stop it from seizing, at least that's what we hope. So that is how your ball joint goes together. You always get a nice shiny new nut with those, so very important. I'm going to clean all the grease off here. Because we're going to be thread locking that when I finally tighten this up. But that'll do for now. So that's the unit assembled, ready to go in. Now we can just push this over. Be very careful when you are pushing the assembly over here on the end of the suspension leg that you don't excessively separate the constant velocity joint, because that's too hard. If it comes apart inside, you can have all sorts of issues. Sometimes, in fact, it's a good idea to separate the drive shaft. In fact, I'm going to do that now. I think that's a 15. It is indeed. Maybe not, maybe 14. Another little tip for you, by the way, if you've got a grease gun, you can actually get grease into your constant velocity joint through this hole. That just runs straight on into the end of the drive shaft. Little tip for you on the way. Okay, that separates everything nicely. Whilst I'm at it, I'm also just going to check the ABS tone rings, which I'll just lift you in here. You can see here. I'll just quickly check those over. Okay, so with that pushed out the way, you can see here the end of the bolts, and of course we need to get the vertical bearing back in location. So I'm just going to slide that one in first. They can be a bit tricky. This is where it really helps to have the drive shaft out of your way. See here, just lifting it up. In. And now locate this bolt from underneath. Can take a bit of finagling. You might also want to use some kind of screwdriver or other similar implement to locate that bolt. It's quite a big one. Rock it around. There we go. Just grab my rubber mallet. Lovely. We'll just pop a little bit of thread lock on the top of that. Remember, with this one, it's a 19mm at the bottom to hold it steady, 21 at the top to secure the nut. Tighten those up in a sec. There we go. We'll just need to tap that into place. Not forget the thread locker. And then draw that slowly back in. This, remember, we're going to go side to side. To make sure that it drives in nice and evenly. Got back out of it. There we go. Not quite. Just giving it a tap every once in a while to make sure everything is nice and level, nice and even, not going to tear any threads out. Just give them a the bottom ball joint fitted. Now I'll just bring you around to the front here just to show you what this is doing. There we go. That should be just about close enough to locate those threads and pull it all tight, which I will go back underneath and do now. One last little wrinkle for you here. When you've got these things located, and of course we're propped up here, supporting under the bottom ball joint, to get these located, it can still be at a very slight angle. You can see the gap at the top there, and it's really difficult to get that to sit flat, because this of course is rubber and effectively spring loaded. So I'm going to use one of these clamps here. I want you to notice on the left hand end, as I clamp this up, it's very slight movement. But it just pulls it tight, and that is just enough to get that bolt started by hand. So now we can drive that in all the way with the offset spanner. Little wrinkle there that really does help make this job a lot less painful. Last little bit here is a bit of thread locker. Oh, this is kind of unnecessary. A bit of thread locker on the nut at the bottom of the bottom ball joint. I'll torque that up in a sec. There you go. So let's get the wheel back on, take it for a drive and see how it goes. Okay, here we go. So moment of truth. As I mentioned earlier, long, slow left-hand corners, particularly when you're coming onto a motorway slip, were the big problem. That was the giveaway with this car, that it was the right-hand control arm and, as it turns out, bottom ball joint that were affected, requiring constant course correction. So this corner in particular was a real challenge. And I'm getting absolutely no symptoms of understeer whatsoever here. Haven't had to touch the wheel at all as I've been going around this corner, just tightening it up a little. Yeah, perfect. So that is one of the major symptoms dealt with completely. The other one was the judder on harsh braking. So let's give it the beans. Oh, steady as a rock. Absolutely no judder whatsoever. There's all of the symptoms of a warped disc have completely gone. Now that in itself is a dead giveaway for this particular problem, because you don't get the judder at slow speeds. It's only when you're braking harshly that you experience the judder. You can check run out as well with a gauge, but a lot easier to just slow down and see if you still have the same symptoms. So there you go. Looks like changing the control arm and, as it turned out in the end, the bottom ball joint, which was definitely on its way out, have solved this problem. So I'm going to call it there. Thank you very much for watching, guys. Hope that's been of interest. If it has, as always, please don't forget to hit like and subscribe. I will see you next time. Cheers.